everyone, it's Em, and welcome to this video. Today I am going in depth and talking about Sia's new film, Music. The movie stars Maddie Ziegler, who plays an autistic girl who passes into the custody of her sober, drug-dealing older sister, Zoo, played by Kate Hudson. The movie is set to release on January 14th in Australia and February 12th in the US, and has stirred up a lot of controversy in the autistic and disability communities. This video will cover everything you need to know about the behind the scenes of the film. The film was announced in 2015 at the Venice Film Festival, and Maddie Ziegler was set to play the lead. Little was known about the plot of the film, but Sia did reveal that it was based on a one-page story that she had written in 2007. In an interview with Vanity, Sia described how she had reached out to Kate Hudson and Leslie Odom Jr. via Twitter to offer them a role in the film.
And I cast all of them from Twitter. I cast Maddie from Twitter for Chandelier. Then I cast Leslie because I saw him in Hamilton. And then so I tweeted him and said, "Do we want to be the star of my movie?" And he said, "Yeah." And we had lunch and he said, "Yeah." And then I saw Kate singing on Instagram some Christmas song. And I was like, "Oh my God, she doesn't sound like every other white actress who was trained at in Broadway singing," which I hate, and I hate musicals. And so I was like, oh. So I tried to get a meeting with her through a mutual friend, and we had lunch. And then she said I was born to do this role. And I said, "Would you cut your hair off? Would you shave your head?" And she said, "Yes." And I was like, "You've got it. You're in."
She later revealed in late 2020 that she had initially wanted Shia LaBeouf to play Kate Hudson's character, but the two had some sort of falling out in which Sia alleges he was a pathological liar who had conned her into an adulterous relationship. The movie was filmed in 2017, and several news outlets posted paparazzi photos from the set. At this point, the film was to be called Sisters. Several photos depicted Maddie making exaggerated facial expressions and body movements, which led to several accusations that Maddie was mocking disabled people. In 2019, Sia revealed in a tweet that the film would be released in October of that year, but that did not end up happening. I'm not entirely sure why the film was delayed. Finally, on November 19th, the trailer was released.
She can understand everything you are
Reactions
saying
to the trailer were immediately divisive. Several fans expressed their love for the trailer and Sia, yet several others were quick to point out the problems with the film. Sia quickly took to Twitter to defend herself and the film, but she only ended up making the situation worse. She lashed out at several autistic people expressing their disappointment in the film, even responding to one person 3 separate times with very different responses. And this is where we get the infamous "maybe you're just a bad actor" tweet. There's a lot going on with this film and Sia's behavior around it. I'm going to discuss 4 main problems: Sia's involvement with Autism Speaks, Maddie's casting in the title character, Sia's treatment of disabled people, and Sia's overall goal for the film. Starting off with Autism Speaks. There are allegations that Sia collaborated with Autism Speaks, a notorious group known for being a thinly veiled autism hate group. It's unclear how much involvement they had in the film, as they claim to have had no involvement, yet a user on Reddit who saw an advanced screening of the film says the group was thanked in the film's credits. Sia has made several contradictory statements on this topic, including claiming that the group came on board 4 years after the film was finished, and that she didn't even know the group was so reviled. These claims don't really add up, though. Sia was informed in April of 2020 and again in May of 2020 that Autism Speaks was a hate group, and she expressed interest in supporting a different group at the time, but she was back to retweeting them again in November of 2020. I'm also unsure how the group could have come on board 4 years after the film was finished if they didn't even start filming until mid-2017. 4 years after that would be mid-2021. It's possible she meant 4 years after the script was finished, but even still, that doesn't make much sense because scripts can always change during the filming process. Moving on to Maddie's casting in the title role. Several people have expressed their frustration that Sia cast Maddie, who is not autistic, to play an autistic character. This is a pretty common trend in media. Autistic actors are very rarely cast to play autistic characters, with the production team opting to use a neurotypical actor instead. Examples of this include Rain Man, What's Eating Gilbert Grape, Atypical, and The Good Doctor. This is also true of disabled characters in general. We see Eddie Redmayne play Stephen Hawking in The Theory of Everything, and Tom Hanks in Forrest Gump. The disability community is adamant that only disabled actors should play disabled characters. Disabled people are oppressed and marginalized, excluded from jobs and spaces because of their disability, and yet able-bodied actors win Oscars for pretending to be disabled in a movie. It's pretty offensive. It's not unlike casting white actors to play non-white characters. Sia attempted to defend her casting choice by claiming that she had, in fact, rehearsed with an autistic actress, but that the experience was too overwhelming for the actress, who then suggested that she used Maddie. This claim is confusing for a few reasons. In 2015, when the film was announced, Maddie was already cast as the lead. is Sia suggesting that she had already tried to cast an autistic actress even before the rest of the cast was hired and they had not even begun filming. There's also evidence that Sia wrote the role for Maddie, as she has claimed that she just keeps writing projects for her.
And then Maddie is the most professional person I've ever worked with in my whole entire life. I want to work with her till the day I die. I actually just keep writing projects for her so that I can keep her safe.
Sia makes other contradictory claims in other tweets, going back and forth between saying it was her choice to cast Maddie to saying an autistic actress suggested she cast Maddie, from saying she'd worked with one autistic actress to having worked with several autistic actors. She even went so far as to claim it would have been cruel, not kind, to cast someone at music's level of functioning. If you're not aware, the Americans with Disabilities Act of 1990 entitles disabled people to workplace accommodations to make the workplace more accessible for them. Sia was the director and producer of this film, so she should have modified the environment to be less stressful for the actress. Not to mention, if an actually autistic person is incapable of playing the autistic character you have written, there is a very real possibility that your character is poorly written. The only cruelty happening here is Sia's refusal to include the very people she claims this movie is for. In a more recent interview, Sia actually admitted that casting Maddie was ableist, but went on to say that it was actually just nepotism, because she's apparently unable to create art without Maddie being involved.
I realized it wasn't ableism. I mean, it is ableism, I guess, as well, but it's actually nepotism, because I can't do a project without her. I don't want to. I wouldn't make art if it didn't include her.
I'm not entirely sure that Sia knows what ableist or ableism means, because she used ableist where she clearly meant abled in this tweet. I also don't think I really need to explain why this defense is a poor one. Nepotism is also bad. It's like saying, technically you could say I did this bad thing, but it was really this other bad thing. Like, come on, Sia. Sia has also described how she and Maddie prepared for the film. She claims they watched movies about autism and YouTube videos of autistic children having meltdowns that their parents posted on YouTube. These videos are incredibly exploitative and paint a very, very narrow image of what autism is and what it looks like. So this research is really, really bad. Additionally, Sia describes how the character is based on the son of a woman who worked at her AA meetings, and she taught Maddie how to act like him.
Your character is based on a real person that I know, and I'm teaching you all of his utterances and all of his tics, and as accurate a representation as that I know.
There's two issues with this. One, there's no evidence that Sia interviewed this boy about his experience being autistic or even asked for permission to use him in that way. The best she could do is teach Maddie how to mimic an autistic person, and that is why people are so hurt by this portrayal. It feels like a mockery of our experience with the world. Two, autism typically presents differently in males and females. Males are more likely to have more externalized symptoms, ones that are stereotypically associated with autism, and so are often diagnosed in elementary school or younger. Females are more likely to have more internalized symptoms, ones that are not as stereotypically associated with autism, and so are often not diagnosed until high school, college, or even into later adulthood. So the character is really a representation of how a non-autistic person sees an autistic boy, told through a female body. Sia also attempted to defend her actions by pointing out that she had hired 13 autistic people, though she later refers to them as neuroatypical, which does not exclusively mean autistic. It also includes things like ADHD, OCD, etc. She also weakened that statement by following it up with not as effing prostitutes or drug addicts, but as doctors, nurses, and singers. Because why only insult the autistic community when you can insult sex workers and people living with addiction too? She also later changes that claim to 13 neuroatypical kids rather than autistic adults. It's possible that she did in fact hire children, but it's also possible that she's referring to autistic adults as kids, which is incredibly infantilizing. It's clear that Sia was trying to deflect her attention away from the main critique that Maddie's character was not played by an autistic actress by pointing out the other disabled actors that she allegedly hired. This is where I'd like to award her with the "not as ableist as you could have been" award. Sia repeatedly uses offensive and ableist language when talking about autistic and disabled people. The autistic community overwhelmingly prefers identity-first language, so autistic person rather than person with autism, and there's been a push to eliminate functioning labels such as high and low functioning, as they tend to just divide the autistic community into people we can tell are autistic and people we can't tell are autistic, and are frequently only used to indicate whether a person is non-speaking or not. The term non-speaking is also typically preferred over non-verbal because not speaking does not mean that a person can't put words to their thoughts. Sia repeatedly uses these phrases even after the community has asked her to stop. In her interview with Vanity, Sia smugly claimed that the term special needs had been replaced by the phrase special abilities and repeatedly uses special abilities to avoid saying the word disabled.
But I've always had a thing for special, and they're called special abilities now, not special needs.
Disabled is not a negative or dirty word, yet when we avoid using it, that indicates that we hold some prejudices against disabilities. You may hear a disabled person describe their disability as their superpower, but that is their choice to do so. It is not for Sia to decide for the disability community that their support needs are now called special abilities. Sia repeatedly objectifies and infantilizes disabled people. That Variety interview was a doozy. At one point, the interviewer describes her interpretation of one moment in the film where Kate Hudson's character recognizes Sia, who plays herself in the film, by her wig.
The fact that Kate Hudson, and again, I'm not giving anything away, you cameo in the movie, Kate Hudson her character realizes you're in the room by seeing your wigs, which I think is so interesting because it's like a layer of a relationship, a wig, you know? And the fact that she can see through that there's a person underneath it is almost like a parallel to the main story here, which is here's this person who can't speak, you know, she might as well be like an inanimate object like a wig, except there's so much going on in there.
I truly hope I don't need to remind you that someone who does not speak is not basically an inanimate object. Just like babies, deaf and hard of hearing people, or people with laryngitis, they are not inanimate objects. Heck, dogs can't speak, and yet Sia would never describe an animal as an inanimate object. I'm almost certain that if someone said her dogs may as well be an inanimate object, she would shut them down very quickly. Yet, she has yet to address this statement, indicating that she sees nothing wrong with describing an autistic girl this way. In more than one interview, Sia has stated that she's always felt drawn to the special abilities community, and she and an interviewer gush over how pure disabled people are.
I've always had an affinity for people with special abilities, magical people, misunderstood people, and people with no voices.
There's this wide-eyed innocence of this character, Music, that in times like this is almost like so radically different, and it's so, just feels so nice, you know, like let's get back to that.
Pure, it's a pure.
Yeah.
And that's what I've always found with the special abilities people that I've fallen in love with, is this purity.
These statements are incredibly infantilizing. It's the kind of thing you might say about puppies or kittens, not about an entire group of people. It just further goes to show that Sia does not view disabled people as independent humans, but rather as cute pets. Autistic people and disabled people in general are just as varied in personality as non-disabled people. Just like a non-autistic person, autistic people can be assholes. What was Sia's goal for this film? Was it to educate people on how to support an autistic family member? To challenge the negative and harmful stereotypes about autism? To prop up the voices of a marginalized group? According to Sia, what she wants people to take away from the movie is compassion.
I want compassion, really. I want people to show compassion. I want people to know that there's somebody in there and don't talk about them like they're not there, because they understand exactly what you're saying, even if it's not in the moment.
The statement is actually pretty harmful because it seems to be built on the commonly held belief that autistic people are trapped within their own minds, that they live in their own world, that you need to break through to them in order to connect, and all of these are false. It's also interesting that her goal is for people to be more compassionate, yet she lashed out against autistics on Twitter. She's also stated that this movie is a love letter to caregivers and to the autism community. I have my own unique view of the community and felt it is underrepresented and compelled to make it. If that makes me a shit, I'm a shit, but my intentions are awesome. So, Sia wanted to make a movie about how she sees autistic people, yet we've seen from other tweets that the way she thinks about and treats autistic people is infantilizing, demeaning, and objectifying. Her word order here is also incredibly telling. She puts the caregivers before the autistic community, indicating that she values the caregivers over the autistic people. She also brushes off any critiques from autistics, saying that, what I do know is that people functioning at Music's level can't get on Twitter and tell me I did a good job either. First of all, I like how she assumes that anyone like Music would think she did a great job. Second, I can assure you, non-speaking autistic people can and do use Twitter. People with intellectual disabilities also can and do use Twitter. and people with varying levels of support needs have expressed their distaste for this movie. But because Sia has some narrow-minded idea of what an autistic person is in her head, she writes off any critique because it obviously comes from somebody who is not enough like her character to understand. In that same Variety interview, Sia also claims that she wanted to recreate the old movies.
I wanted to make it like the old movies, that like Forrest Gump and Rain Man, and I short described this movie as Rain Man the musical, but with girls.
These movies, while enjoyable films, are not particularly beneficial to the autistic and disability community. They buy into media tropes of autism and just perpetuates misinformation. In admitting that all she wanted to do was recreate these films, Sia indicates that she never actually wanted to uplift the autistic community. She'd much rather take an Oscar-winning plot and slap her own spin on it in a thinly veiled attempt at her own nomination. Even with everything I've covered here, there's more to this story. I wasn't able to include every tweet or interview clip, so I encourage you to watch other videos to learn more. We haven't even gotten to the actual content of the movie yet, but I hope you can see just how damaging Sia has been to the autistic community. Please do not support Sia by seeing this film or listening to her music. You can support the autistic community by sharing this information and encouraging those around you to boycott Sia as well.